Hello everyone. It's good to see you all here, and welcome to another episode of Sea Stories. And we've got a really interesting guest tonight, and it's also a two-pronged story. It's a story about Robert Manry's trip across the Atlantic in 1965, but it's also a little bit of a story about a guy who was inspired by it and put some lost film footage together and made a wonderful movie called Manry at Sea, and that would be Steve Wystrach. Say hi, Steve.
Hello.
Good job.
Hi. Hi, it's great to be here. Thank you very much, Duncan. It's always a lot of fun to talk about Robert.
Absolutely. We're going to have a great time. Ladies and gentlemen, Steve Wystrach, and he's going to tell us a little bit about the making of this movie. We've got clips to show as we go, and we'll flip back and forth. And Steve, you were a sailor and a filmmaker, mostly film editor. And then you've produced and directed Robert Manry at Sea. Can you tell me about the genesis of how it came together and what inspired you to do it?
I certainly can. I moved out to Los Angeles in 1977 from Chicago. I had started working there in the film industry, and I had an opportunity to move out to Los Angeles. I still live here today. And after a while, I had always been interested in sailing. I'd had a couple of opportunities on small boats while I was in Chicago. And so I started taking sailing lessons and eventually was able to rent boats and sail off to the nearby islands like Catalina Island and so forth. And eventually bought a boat. My first boat was a CNC 35, which is a wonderful little sloop. And later on, I traded that for a Polaris 43, which is
It's a
a
great
kind
book.
of flush deck um, uh, Robert Perry design. And in 1995, I started prepping the boat to sail to Hawaii with a friend of mine. And I was reading many books about small boat voyages and single-handed voyages and so forth. I really became an avid reader of all those types of books. And one of them was this book, Tinkerbelle by Robert Manry. And I'm sure many of you have probably read it. And it's really a great story that he wrote. He was a newspaper editor in Cleveland, Ohio, and had a lifelong dream of sailing across the Atlantic. He was born and grew up in the foothills of the Himalayas in India, of all places. Had missionary parents, but eventually came back to the United States and became a newspaper reporter and settled in Cleveland. And he bought an old trailer boat, a 13 and a half foot open sailboat.
Mhm.
And that became the basis of all family vacations starting in the mid 50s. And eventually he built a cabin over it and so forth. And he put together this plan to sail across the Atlantic and never told anybody but his family that he was going to do this. He kept it a secret because he was afraid that if anybody found out about it, they would stop him for, kind of obvious reasons. And anyway, that's what his book is about. And one of the really great things for sailors about this book is that he has a very, very detailed chapter at the end with a great description of everything about his boat, including the full equipment list of everything that he took. And one of the things was that he listed was a 16 millimeter movie camera and 50 rolls of Kodachrome. Now, during my time working in Los Angeles, I worked as a film editor, and a lot of my work over that period of time had begun to involve stock footage and old movie footage and so forth. And I'd become interested in archival footage and film restoration. And so when I read this, it just started kind of ringing bells in my head about old film and so forth, and sailing, and what had happened to this footage. And he had died in 1971, only a few years after his trip. So I immediately had my producer start looking into what had happened.
About what year was that?
And that was in 1996. And this was still before I had sailed to Hawaii. But that's when my search began, was in 1996. And very quickly found there was no sign whatsoever of his film or anybody who knew anything about it, or where he was, or any member of the Manry family. There was nothing but dead ends. However, that is just a reason to start looking. That was not a reason to stop looking.
All right, well, let's give this a roll here, and we'll get going and talk about that for a while.
Okay.
What does Robert Manry mean to you?
Doesn't mean anything.
Have you heard of Mr. Robert Manry?
Yes, last night on the news.
And what do you think of it?
Not much, really.
You don't think they made too much fuss over it?
Not at all. Not at all. I mean, there aren't many people that would do it, are there?
What do you think of Robert Manry?
I think it's brilliant.
Do you think they're making too much fuss over it?
Well, I think everybody's allowed to have their own opinion in a case like that, aren't they?
From New York, here is I've Got a Secret, starring Steve Allen.
Nice to have you with us, sir. Now, for the moment, panel, we're going to refer to this gentleman as Mr. X. So, Mr. X, if you'll whisper your secret to me, we'll let the folks at home know what's going on. Wow. The clue concerns something that Mr. X did, and we'll begin the game this time with Betsy Palmer.
All right. Mr. X, what you did, was this spoken of in the newspaper?
Yes.
Did you do this by yourself?
Yes.
Are you from the Midwest?
Yes.
Are you also employed, sir, by a newspaper?
Yes.
Were you for a long time without your wife and daughter?
Yes.
Sir, this is just a wild guess, but are you a copy reader by trade?
Yes.
I see.
This is the captain and the crew of the Tinkerbelle, Mr. Robert Neil Manry. The first question I must ask you, of course, is why? What made you try a voyage like this?
Why did you do it? It's a tough question to answer, especially a man with a wife and 2 children.
it's not an opening to a film. I don't know what is. That's lovely. That's lovely. What can you tell us about the beginning of this project and, what getting it done?
Well, it where I first made a breakthrough was to find out that his son, Douglas Manry, was still living in Cleveland. And I got a last known address and wrote to Douglas, and he wrote back. And I got his phone number, and I called him, and he said that, he gave me the secret code, which was required in order to talk to his sister, who was living in New York City, and that required dialing up a certain number of rings and hanging up and then dialing back. And that is because she had had a traumatic incident that had happened to her previously. And so she was reluctant to talk to people. And but anyway, so over a period of time, I got to know them, and I gained their trust, and we started corresponding. And what I discovered was that Robert was really, he had been kind of the real magnetic center of the extended family. And after he died, everything just sort of, in terms of the family, kind of drifted apart. And they had their Uncle John, who was Robert's younger brother. They told me that he had moved to Indonesia, and they had no idea where he was. And so, I just sort of tucked that back in my brain, and that they thought that their aunt lived in Oregon, and they had another aunt who wouldn't talk to anybody, and she lived in New Hampshire. And, so they gave me all these clues, but they weren't really too helpful as far as finding anybody. But I started looking through telephone books in Oregon, and this in '96 there wasn't a whole lot of internet or anything, so it was not quite the same as today. But I eventually was able to put two and two together, and I found that their aunt lived in Eugene, Oregon, and I did get a hold of her, and she told me that their brother was living in Calgary, Canada. And I got a hold of him, and I said, well, they had thought that you were living in Indonesia. And he said, oh my goodness, I had a business trip to Indonesia for 3 weeks, and, where did that come from? Kind of thing. So this is, how families, disintegrate. And so there was a period in around the year 2000 where I was the only person, I think, in the world who knew where everybody was and how to get a hold of everybody. And not everybody wanted to know how to get a hold of everybody, but some of them did, and so if they did, I would put them in touch with each other. And there was, for example, Douglas he was really afraid to talk to Uncle John, because apparently he had been invited to go out and spend, a couple of weeks one summer with him, but for some reason or other, flaked out and never went, and then never said anything about it. And so he felt bad about it. And then, the years go by and he still had never said anything about it. And so, time goes by and it gets worse and worse, and the guilt gets worse and worse. And, and John, of course, hadn't even remembered this, those kinds of things. And
absolutely.
So eventually they got together and they had a wonderful relationship, and if I hadn't shown up on the scene, none of this would have happened. So that was actually a really fun part of the project, was just kind of getting to know the Manry family. In any case, I eventually reached John Manry in Calgary, and he said, "Oh, yeah, Robert's film. It's in a cardboard box in the back of my garage." And to be honest, I was going to throw it out in my spring cleaning coming up. And if you're interested in it, I'd be happy to send it to you. So the next morning, there was a stack of pre-addressed, prepaid FedEx waybills on his front porch that I had sent overnight to him. And he packed it up and he sent all the stuff down to me. And so that's where I got his film for this trip, the Atlantic trip, plus another voyage that he took subsequently, where he sailed around the eastern United States in 1967 and 68.
Well, it's quite a story, Steve. That's for sure.
Yeah.
It's wonderful. Well, I'll tell you what. We're going to go on to your next clip, and this is sort of a description of Robert Manry's home life and what he did for a living. So let's take a...
Right. This is kind of how he was thought of by his colleagues. Yeah.
All right.
I met Robert when he came to the plane dealer, which I think was in the 50s.
I knew who he was. He was one of the guys around the copy desk, but I don't know if I had said more than hello to him.
And copy editors aren't the lowest of the low, but they lead very dull lives.
If you were a reporter, you didn't have much to do with Manry because he was always in the corner. He was a copy editor. And in the pecking order of the paper, at least from the young guy's aspect, copy editors were all guys who didn't want to go out in the street anymore. The copy desk is basically a horseshoe configuration. The copy editors sit around the outside of that rim. Because you were rooted onto that desk, you couldn't socialize, you couldn't move around and talk to a lot of people.
Here was a man who had done what basically is a boring job day after day, year after year, correcting the spelling of other reporters who were perhaps less skilled than he was.
What motivated Robert Manry? How a copy editor who sits there and just does this dull thing day after day, day after day, has other things going on in his mind.
He didn't hang around. Very few people knew Manry that well.
I think one of the tragedies of life is the fact that young people have these dreams, things they want to do or achieve, and as they grow older and run up against the hard realities of existence, often they have to sort of give up their dreams one by one until finally, a lot of them, I'm afraid, give up all their dreams. And I was determined that this wasn't going to happen to me. I planned specifically for this particular voyage for more than a year, I would say about 14 months.
He was very determined, too. He taught himself celestial navigation with an old Navy surplus sextant sitting on the steps of his house taking sights. And he took it everywhere he went, so he was always shooting sights of one sort and another and then checking the navigation against a logbook and maps.
He certainly prepared very thoroughly for this trip. Robert took the proper navigational tools. He got all the necessary charts and everything, the safety equipment. He found it quite a strain to afford them, I guess. My mother and various other people helped in some way, but most of the financing and everything came through Robert himself. It was pretty much of a shoestring operation, but it wasn't an expensive undertaking as such things are, you know. He could have spent twice as much and just accomplished no more.
The boat itself was so incredible. This man had tucked an enormous amount of material, provisions, and equipment into such an extremely tiny little cabin.
It's a great sentiment about you. He could have spent twice as much and accomplished no more.
It's a great thing. I love the pen of the books. And to be honest, it was a book that actually got me interested in sailing when I was something like 9 or 10. So it is great to see those old books. And a nice touch ending with the flag. So Robert Manry gets it together. And of course, as we will find out, he sails from Falmouth, Massachusetts, and his goal is Falmouth, England.
That's right. Yep.
Yep.
Well, as a copy editor, one of their jobs is to come up with headlines, and he was a great copy editor, and so Falmouth to Falmouth is a terrific headline, you know. So
well, I especially love the part where he doesn't tell his boss he's going until he gets to Falmouth. It says it.
Right. That's right. Yeah, exactly.
This is a pitch to ask you to join us at the American Schooner Association. Founded in 1972, the American Schooner Association is dedicated to the history, preservation, and promotion of the schooner rig. You don't need to be a schooner owner to join the organization, just to be interested in these beautiful boats. As time marches forward, the role that schooners played in the history of our country is fading too. Your membership helps support educational programs and provides a base for preserving these vessels. So, join us. It's inexpensive, important, and we'd love to have you along. We'll see you at amschooner.net.
Yeah. Well, one of the things that I think it is certainly compared today unique about his voyage, and you do read about it in some other books of that era, but you don't really have an opportunity to see it like you do with the footage that he took, and also some of the footage that I was able to find that was taken from other perspectives, is the fact that so many ships spotted him and stopped. And we have a couple of clips here that are part of those experiences, and the next one is one of those.
We'll bring that up then, and here we go.
It was the 8th day, the morning of the 8th day, and I was sleeping, and I all of a sudden thought I heard people shouting. And then I said to myself, well, that's crazy. There can't be anybody out in the ocean here shouting. And so I was about to go back to sleep again. It was terrifying, like the banshees of hell. I threw open the cabin hatch and shot out on deck and ready to dive overboard when I saw that it wasn't the ship bearing down on Tinkerbelle after all. It was a huge submarine, so close I could almost have jumped over on it.
My name is Robert Rentschler. I was in the Navy, stationed aboard the USS Tench, SS-417, and we were on our way to a NATO mission. Radar reported something out there. we saw a stick. Then we saw the little boat out there bobbing. We thought somebody was in trouble, got lost, called the captain to the bridge, pulled up next to him, gave him a blast on the ship's horn, and when you blow it, it shakes the whole boat. I mean, he was a little shocked, but very coherent, talking.
I think the captain and the men on the submarine were pretty startled too, because he yelled over, "Do you need any help?" And I yelled back, "No thanks." So we just sort of stood there, stupefied, and the submarine slowly drifted away, and so it was too far to talk anyway.
After we left, we thought he was crazy. I think if we would have had our way aboard, we would have picked him up and called the Coast Guard and said, "Come and get this guy."
Isn't that great? I might point out that there is not a chance in hell that would happen today. Pretty cool. One of the kingpins of your story is the rivalry between two papers. Could you describe the Cleveland scene and the papers at the time?
Well, this was still the mid-'60s, and daily newspapers they were both still a very active part of the news scene. The evening news and network news was on the rise. Walter Cronkite and Chet Huntley and David Brinkley, they had been on the air at that point for a few years. But most large cities, including Cleveland, had a morning paper and an evening paper. Manry's paper, the Cleveland Plain Dealer, was a morning paper, and they had a crosstown rival named the Cleveland Press. And so when Manry left, his paper, the Cleveland Plain Dealer, thought, "Hey, okay, this is kind of cool. One of our own has escaped the dull gray life of the newspaper, and what we should do is follow him. We'll get reports from the Coast Guard and so forth, and we'll write lots of stories, and we'll sell lots of papers." And so that was kind of their plan for the summer. And the summer tends to be kind of slow a lot of the times as far as news goes. So they're always looking for opportunities, to find stories in the summer. At least that was their general inclination. So that was what they were doing. So they actually did get a report from the Coast Guard, which they had contacted immediately, and they did get a report when the USS Tench, that submarine, spotted them. So they were tracking him from that point on.
Yeah. Well, interestingly enough, part of the movie talks about the fact that there was such a rivalry between the two papers that they had spies in each other's offices.
Yes.
And the press got a whiff of this.
Yes, they did. In fact, I think we do have a clip that gets into that.
Good. Well, then I won't take you up too long now. Hey.
We can.
Let's roll the. It looks like the steel vendors coming up next.
Yeah, that's another ship that he met a little bit further down. Another few weeks later, and this one was really key because that's the one that really triggered the Plain Dealer to make plans to take the Manry family over to Falmouth. So yeah, this is kind of a key moment.
All right, let's take a look at that.
Okay.
It was on July 5th, more than a month at sea, another beautiful day, and I said to myself, the only thing that can make this day any better is for a ship to come along and pick up my mail. And about 20 minutes later, this ship appeared, just like the answer to a prayer. And the captain maneuvered very well, and we got close together. You know, he kept scratching his head as though he couldn't believe what he was seeing. He wanted to rescue me. He couldn't understand that I didn't need any food or water or anything. And I think he was kind of disappointed that I didn't agree to be rescued. But anyway, he was very friendly, and he agreed to take the mail, the letters I'd written aboard, and mail them to my friends and family when he got to New York. So someone heaved over a line, and I attached the letters in a waterproof packet, and they pulled them aboard. And then the steel vendor circled off to the left and toward New York, and Tinkerbelle and I continued on toward Europe.
I was the anchorman and the commentator for WEWS television, and there used to be an enormous hostility between print and broadcast. And here was a town, a major city in the United States, with two papers, one evening paper called the Cleveland Press, one morning paper called the Plain Dealer.
It was a very tight competitive situation. We fought them tooth and claw over every little story.
The competition between them was so fierce for circulation that both sides had spies functioning within each other's operations.
Manry's employer, the Cleveland Plain Dealer, didn't even know he was going, and he kept it a secret from them.
The first we knew that he actually was single-handing was when we got a letter that he left with his wife after he had set sail.
One of the driving things through this entire film, of course, is that rivalry and the lengths to which both papers went to get that scoop. You want to talk about that a little bit, or you want to wait?
No, it's kind of a fun part of it, really, is because it all of a sudden becomes two different sailing adventures, really, because you have Manry, who's just off doing his voyage of a lifetime, and going through all of the things that a sailor has to go through to fulfill a voyage, and is really completely oblivious to everything that's going on in the world. This is a time when we're launching spacecraft, into orbit and so forth, and and he's out there in the middle of the Atlantic as alone as an astronaut is orbiting the Earth. And then at the same time, all of a sudden, you have these competing news organizations trying to figure out, how they're going to, beat each other out of getting the story of this great adventure. And it just gets crazier and crazier as time goes by.
Story.
Yeah.
But it wasn't all fun and games out there either.
No, this was a very, very serious thing. The Plain Dealer, they started first, and they got a hold of the RAF. The RAF was constantly running submarine hunting exercises because this was the Cold War, and they were looking for the Russians all the time. And they said, "Yeah, sure, we're out there all the time. We'll look for this little boat." Yeah. And so by the time the Cleveland Plain Dealer, which they were owned by Scripps Howard, which owned that TV station with Bill Jorgensen. So they decided, since they had a TV station, they would send him, and that everything that he wrote, they would just rewrite for the newspaper. So by the time they got involved, the RAF would have nothing to do with them. So what they did instead was they got a hold of Lloyd's of London, which tracks every ship that's out there. And so anytime one of these ships, such as the Steel Vendor, would see Manry, they would report his position. So Lloyd's knew where he was, and so they're all using very creative ways of figuring out, where he is, where he might be going, those kinds of things.
Well, we've got a clip here of at sea in a storm, so maybe that would be a good stop.
This sort of moves it along.
Yeah, let's do that.
Okay.
Being alone was the worst part of it, though. And it came as something of a surprise because I've always considered myself kind of introspective and introverted. But it did bother me much more than I expected. Waves were huge. It's kind of a scary feeling to know there are 3 miles of ocean below you. I had to sail hard day and night without sleep, and as a result I went into another hallucination. There were other little sailboats accompanying me, and sort of ghost ship accompanying me. And this time I imagined I was in part of the ocean called the place of the sea mountain, where the waves were huge. And this place was controlled by a man named McGregor, and he had a devilish sort of choir that made the waves bigger the louder they sang, and they were singing their lungs out. McGregor. They were trying to do me in, and I was trying to stop them from doing it. Elderly man was pretending to be a friend, but in reality he was an assassin. And I realized I had to save my son. I seemed to be in a sort of ocean maze. I didn't know how to get out of it. How do you get out of this place? And I met this little character walking on the water, and I asked him, why can't I get out of here? Well, the trouble is you've been sailing clockwise. If you sail counterclockwise, you can get out. So I started sailing counterclockwise.
When he got more than halfway across, that's when the plain dealer's interest began to peak.
3 or 4 of us huddled about what we were going to do about this and pretty much plotted out the whole thing.
Russ was a very smart guy, intellectual guy, very easygoing guy.
I was promotion director and assistant to the publisher, so we regarded this as a promotion as well as a good story about one of our people.
Russ was kind of an aloof guy, too. He seemed to take everything as a joke.
Since I had an editorial background and a sailing background, I was considered a good victim to go on it.
We got word that they were making plans to put their staff of editors in Falmouth, England, and send Manry's wife, Virginia, and the 2 children over to meet him should he arrive safely.
Virginia Manry and the 2 kids flew down from Cleveland, and we got together and jumped on an airplane and went to England.
The Cleveland Press thought, what if you could get there and intercept him before he arrives in England? But what are the odds of finding one man in a 13.5-foot sailboat sailing the Atlantic?
There were no satellites. There were no sophisticated electronics to find this guy out there in the ocean. So we had to believe that he's either going to make it or he's going to drown.
What we found out was that Lloyd's of London kept track of every single vessel that's at sea. So Tom Pascura came to me and he said, Bill, you're a sailor. What are the chances that you could find Manry at sea if we give you an approximate location? I said, the odds are incredibly bad. He said, are you willing to try? I said, you know, it's one of the most ridiculous ideas I've ever heard of. Within a couple of hours, I was at the airport, and the idea was that we would keep this entire operation secret.
And aren't you glad you missed that hallucination? Craziness. Well, as the story went on, of course, they did that, and I think we've got a little bit more coming up about the Big Gulf Glory as well. What can you tell us about what we're about to see now?
Well, of course, he's now just continuing to sail along, and lo and behold, he encounters another ship, and this one becomes pivotal because he's now getting close enough to England that after his encounter with it, they radio his position. And both the RAF and Lloyd's get the word. So, yeah, we can
All right.
look at that.
Should we take a look at that?
Sure.
Okay, here we go. Let's see what we got here.
I saw about 60 ships, and I think 5 of them came to a full stop. Well, I was about 300 miles away when this ship came up, the Belle Gulf Glory, a Belgian ship, and the captain was the most wonderful, friendly man I've ever met, really. And we had quite a long conversation. He stopped his ship. As a matter of fact, he kept going so fast, blown by the wind, that we couldn't keep abreast, and as he got too far away to talk any further, he'd bring that huge ship all the way around and go by again, and we'd talk a little more. You know, the captain just insisted on giving me food, although I didn't really need it. And he had it out there on deck, so I decided that the polite thing would be to accept it. In the middle there is a whole roast chicken right out of the oven. It's still hot. And to the right is some potato croquettes, a couple of bottles of beer, and some 7-Up. So it was just like Thanksgiving at sea. After that, I thanked the captain, and then the Belle Gulf Glory went on toward the English Channel. It was bound for London. The captain very kindly gave me 3 deep blasts on the steam whistle, you know, and I gave him 3 little peeps back on the little gas horn I had. And Tinkerbelle and I hurried along afterwards as fast as we could go, which wasn't very fast. I think the captain radioed ahead and reported my position. And that evening, the RAF came over in a Shackleton bomber, It zoomed over a couple of times and then came in very low and dropped a couple of cylindrical canisters, and there was more food. And there was also a message saying, "Welcome to British waters. You are big news, and we will come back tomorrow with gentlemen of the press."
Yeah, man, the plot thickens.
Yeah, this is when kind of all hell starts to break loose, so to speak. And so he's now really becoming, he's getting closer and closer to England, and but weather sets in, and but there's a lot of anticipation in Falmouth because everybody in Falmouth knows that he's coming. It's the middle of August now. He's been at sea for 2.5 months, and summertime. Falmouth and Cornwall is a very popular place for vacationers in England. And so it's always overrun with tourists at that time of the year. So it was very crowded, and so I guess this final clip kind of addresses some of what was going on there. And
all right,
so
let's take a look at that then.
Yeah, sure.
Here we go.
Manry mania gripped the town. First of all, everyone was talking about him. They didn't know where Manry had gone. It caused a lot of excitement. It was in the papers, it was on the TV. RAF Shackletons were flying out to see if they could spot him. They couldn't find him, and we thought maybe he had disappeared.
To Land's End, England, and this report.
Today it was Virginia Manry who won the attention as she put into port after her trawler, rented for her by private news interests, ran low on fuel after 80 hours of searching with no result.
Thank you.
All right,
Wait a minute.
Right.
My
There we are. Lovely.
knees don't give too well.
What's the matter? You've been at sea a long time. How do you feel now?
I feel real. I didn't get sick once.
We talked about seasickness when you left
Yeah,
here.
but I didn't get
It
sick.
didn't bother. I'm
No.
glad to hear that.
The cook said if I didn't get sick on that boat, I wouldn't get sick on any of them.
I would agree. What are your plans now? Where are you going?
I'm going home to take a bath.
We thought you might stay a little longer today because
They ran out of
visibility.
fuel.
Tomorrow, the fleet puts out to sea again. The News Navy is hoping and banking, betting and spending on their calculated hunch. And we have to bet with them, unless something has happened to Bob Manry, that tomorrow is the day that the Tinkerbelle will be found again.
I'm not a bit worried.
So it's simply a matter of waiting now.
It's just
Maybe,
that the boat is slow. At home, when they put up the small craft warnings, that's when we get the boat out. Because it takes
then you gotta
practically a
get offshore
25
again.
wind to get her going.
Right.
Yeah. But I think if he's slow, it's maybe because he's saving himself for coming around the Scillies and all that, because, there's more danger there with all those rocks and everything.
Of course, the people in Cleveland are quite concerned now. And,
Sure, well,
maybe
they're
part of that's
concerned
our
with-
fault.
Yeah, well, shame on you. They're afraid when we go out on Lake Erie, they'll say, "Oh, you mean you go sailing out on Lake Erie? Where else would we go, for goodness sake?" But anybody who knew Robert wouldn't be afraid.
It could be that the biggest single event yet to come from all of this suspense, intrigue, and backbiting news competition may turn out to be the rescue of a boatload of reporters who flounder while chasing another boatload of reporters, chasing Mrs. Manry, who is chasing after Bob, who is just having a ball for himself somewhere out on the Atlantic Ocean. This is Bill Jorgensen at Land's End.
What a great final quote for that clip. I can see it all. It's all good. Well, of course, he did make it across, And you might take a moment, if you would, just to describe his arrival in Falmouth.
Well, it was tumultuous, to say the least. Reports are that there were 50,000 people on the quay that day to meet him. There was just this enormous armada of small boats that went out to meet him and escort him into Falmouth Harbor, and it's really quite overwhelming.
One of the quotes that really struck me is somebody said, "It's as big as the Beatles," and if you look at those clips, people are shoulder to shoulder for blocks.
Yeah. No, it was really, really pretty amazing, and yeah, I noticed that one of the questions in the chat was about John Riding, who was sailing east to west across the Atlantic at the same time. He was in a smaller boat, and he arrived, and I think there were maybe two people who who saw him arrive when he landed, and he was in a much smaller boat. And I mean, it was just, a completely different reaction.
Well, it goes to show you, just the hype that was built up around this.
Yeah.
Pretty amazing. Pretty amazing. Now, you are really retired at this point now, and tell me a little bit about your feeling about making this movie. I mean, how do you feel about that?
Well, I was really happy that I was able to do this. I was a commercial film editor for most of my career, as well as more and more I got into the archival and preservation, and really transitioned into archival work for the second half of my career. But when you're working as an editor, you're working on somebody else's film, and it's a very interesting and collaborative and creative process. Creatively, it's very fulfilling work, and I enjoyed it very much. But it's somebody else's film, and when I got the filmmaking bug in high school, it was because I wanted to make movies, and so my career was sort of a lifelong getting sidetracked from that, and that's okay. That's what most of people who get into the film industry end up doing. But I always wanted to make a film, and this just happened to be that thing that I just feel so lucky that I guess I just feel like I was the right person to read that chapter and recognize, I was a sailor and an editor and an archivist, that when I read that chapter, I understood the significance of it, and so I acted. And it took me a long time. It was largely self-financed. I'm probably, if I had kept a spreadsheet on it, I'm probably still underwater, which is why I didn't keep a spreadsheet because I didn't want to have to worry about it. And because it wasn't really about that to me. It's just one of those things that once I got involved with it, it was just something that I had to do. And I did get some financial help, and a lot of the companies that I had worked with over the years, they certainly helped me with various aspects of transferring film, and and some of the digital cleanup and things like that. So I did get a lot of help from industry partners and so forth. So I'm very grateful for all of the help and everything. I was eventually able to collaborate with a terrific editor. One of the awards that it won was for documentary editing, and Steve Armstrong, the editor, really deserved that award. And it also won an award for documentary screenwriter, and he was a co-writer. And the film certainly would not have been the film that it is without him. I knew very early on that even though I'm an editor, that I could not edit the film because an editor has to be objective. And once I started doing the research and interviewing people and so on and so forth, you very quickly can start losing your objectivity. And so, I decided very early on I was going to have to find somebody to do that. And it took a while, both to find the right person and to, save up enough money to afford the right person, which is why it took whatever it was, 18 years or so to finish the film. But, all in good time.
Steve, I got to tell you, it's a magnificent film, and I want to commend you and anybody who would like a really fun and engaging hour and a half to look up Manry at Sea, and that can be viewed on Vimeo, vimeo.com. Someone has asked to show the one of the quotes at the beginning, so I thought we'd just drop over just for a second. We have a few minutes left, and I'd like to just run that for them. And let's take a look. And the film is Manry at Sea, and you can catch that again on Vimeo. And take a look. Take a look.
And I do also have DVDs and Blu-rays if anybody happens to be interested in those. And if you can, the book is available. It's out of print, but keep your eyes open at your local bookstores. And there's an ebook of it on all the ebook places. We
and your website is Robert Manry Project, all one word,
right.
.com.
That's right. Yeah.
So, and I have to say, having browsed that a little bit, pretty darn interesting.
Yeah, I got a hold of his log from the Western Reserve Historical Society and transcribed that. And so we have his whole ship's log up there that you can read. And it does vary a little bit from his book. He mentions things in his log that he does not mention in his book. And there's some resources there. And,
There's more stuff to see and more places to go. Steve,
right.
I want to thank you so much for your time. It was a chore to track you down, but I got you.
Well, thank you. I really enjoy the opportunity anytime, and I really appreciate it. Thank you.
All right. Ladies and gentlemen, thanks for joining us. This recording will be available in a few days up on our website, GCBSR, Great Chesapeake Bay Schooner Race.org, GCPSR.org. And we'll look forward to it. And let's see, do we have any more further questions? We've got some nice things coming up on our chat. Oh, the Falmouth landing. I will tell you, ladies and gentlemen, that's worth watching the film just to see that. It is crazy. All right. Thanks so much, everyone, for joining us. And we will look forward to seeing you next time on Sea Stories.